How many people are pretty familiar with The Simpsons? Couple, handful? So you know don't do what Donnie don't does? Yeah, you know that? And you know how confusing that is for Bart. I thought about that when we were trying to come up with the idea for this, and I think I exploited the opportunity to tell stories I've never told anybody before because it was never relevant. And when I started traveling, I wanted to get stories because I'd never really been out of Kansas. And so that's probably what it's going to be. It's going to be a little conversational. I'm not afraid of questions. I do have too many slides to get through, so if it is difficult, we'll go through them all. And I'm going to try not to invoke The Simpsons one last time. I'm going to try not to be like Grandpa Abe Simpson, talking about when he used to go to Shelbyville and he used to tie 3 onions to his belt because that was the fashion at the time. And he wanted to get stories that are long, that go nowhere. I'm going to try not to do that, but it might be hard. I thought I knew what was going on in Asia. I thought I knew a little bit about China when I went there. And when I got there, I learned that I really didn't. I thought I could speak a little Chinese, and I got there and I couldn't teach them how to speak the Chinese I learned. So I kind of felt like I was kind of lucky in ways that I didn't have a lot of knowledge. I think that sometimes it's really good to have plausible deniability. It's a weird why. And that's going to come into play when I explain a few key terms here. Now, we're working with the Asian Studies Development Program this summer, and we talked about identity a lot and how there's some fundamental differences between the East and the West, and one way of approaching it is in the way we see ourselves in the sense of identity. And a couple things I'll throw out: the idea of relationships and the importance of family relationships. I believe as a linguist there are about 37 to 47 words in English to describe family members: mother, father, sister, brother, uncle, aunt. I think there's about 40. There's over 100 in Chinese. Mother's brother, father's brother, 2 different words. Older sister, younger sister, they're different names. Mei Mei is younger, JJ is older. The relationship, by the way, that next word, that's a huge word. People make fun of it and say, oh, it's not that important because people say it's important. Guanxi's huge. It means relationship. And it means a little bit more than that. Sometimes people say it means like one hand washes the other, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's one of the most common expressions that gets you out of trouble and eases social tension is to say, don't worry about it. In Chinese, mei guanxi. It's not connected. Don't worry about it. It's no big deal. The idea of blood. I don't think we'll get into that, but face is huge, and plausible deniability kind of plays into this idea of face. People make a big deal out of how difficult it is to understand the Chinese concept of face, mianzi. I got it really quick. I'm from a really small town in Kansas. Basically, I grew up on a farm. So you know everybody in a small town, and you know their family, and you know their family back a couple generations, more or less. It's the same in China. It's 5,000 years old. And people haven't moved that much, so they know each other. And even when they don't, if you have a relationship, it makes a big difference. And we kind of have the same concept here. People say it doesn't make sense. I say it's like, have you ever corrected a teacher for making a mistake in class and find out that it doesn't work? You find out, you get in trouble, you get sent to the principal's office, and the principal says, yeah, I don't care if you're right, it's more important to respect your teacher. Okay, that's the Chinese concept of face. It's not that alien, it's not completely different from what we have here. I highly encourage you to read anything by Chu Xiaolong. We've got quite a few of their novels, their detective stories. They're delicious, they're wonderful. They're on the list that I handed out, and there's more of them over there. We've got some great Chinese collections here on campus. And I'm not going to try and explain what shame is exactly, but it is different from guilt. I grew up Catholic, so I understand guilt really well. Shame is different, and I still don't have it figured out. Oh. So, now on to the main gist, crux of this presentation, what not to do in Asia. There's certain gestures and body language you don't want to do. All right? Let's see, what do I have listed up here? This is mostly showing someone the sole of your foot. For example, come into school in a college classroom, if there's an empty chair in front of you, often you'll throw your feet up on the chair, sitting down, showing the instructor the bottoms of your feet. Like, this. Monstrously disrespectful in most of Asia. I know that's why when you go to a temple in Thailand, in Bali, you'll see people sitting crisscross applesauce. Because that's what you're supposed to say now. You're not supposed to say Indian style. It's crisscross applesauce. You keep your feet pointed in that way. And how important is it? I got to where it bugged me when people did it to me. Because I assumed they knew. The problem is I was a foreigner. So they assumed I wouldn't know or care. So I don't know that they were trying to show me disrespect. But it bugged me. Patting people on top of the head is a big no-no. You see someone, oh, cute kid, tap, tap, tap. That bugs people. Huge in Thailand, but throughout Asia and Southeast Asia, it's really not cool. But if I walked through a classroom and patted the top of anyone's head, how would that go over? What do you think? Wouldn't that be condescending? Someone pats me on top of the head, I'm not going to take it well. But a lot of your books will talk about, don't do this. Anywhere in Asia, Korea, Japan, China, Taiwan, Thailand, do not gesture someone to come to you like this. And I will not respond in class even anymore because it creeps me out. They do this, which used to confuse me a bit because, what, go away, come here. But then someone goes like this, it means come here, come here, come here, come here. But do this, and that's how you call a dog or an unmentionable thing, and you don't do it. And learn to look a double entendre in the eye. I do look a double entendre in the eye without laughing because you're going to hear some funny things said because of broken English or misunderstandings, and it's better to let it slide sometimes. Try not to assume what local reactions to local culture are going to be. I saw these things. I love this pagoda thing on the way to my house. My first home in the country when I was living overseas. The first 6 months of my life in Taiwan, I lived in a dormitory downtown in the city. Really crowded. I'm from the country. I wanted to be as far from people as I could get, which was tough. I had to drive by one of these, and to me, I thought, oh, that's culture. That's awesome. That's gorgeous. That's made me feel like I was in Asia. That's where they put dead people, though. And this was in a graveyard, and they burned ghost money there. You see, I had this house. My first house in the country was, I thought, really close to town. I lived with a lot of foreigners, sort of an expatriate community. It was cheap. It was really cheap. And it was pretty close to town, if you count mileage. But none of my Chinese friends would visit me because it was too far. Asian communication in general is really indirect. When they said too far, there was something else that they meant. They had to drive by these things and basically go through a cemetery to get to my house, and that was taboo. That bothered people. There was a way to get to my house without going through a cemetery, but it was really a long way around, and that's what they would do. They would go the long way around. But yeah, it was kind of weird sometimes driving through the cemetery because at one point they will dig up bones and take them home, and then they'll burn them sometimes. And I remember seeing a hibachi set up with, I think, a skull on it. Land is really tight in Asia, and it's different. Don't joke about ghosts. I have a brother. I'm married to a Chinese woman, Taiwanese woman, one of the Chinas. I have a brother-in-law who's from England. Met a guy at Hawaii who is also married to a Chinese woman from China. And it's funny, but it's like talking to these guys, there's certain things that just make me go, make me smile. For example, when I was looking for a hotel to put my family in when I got married, someone at the Eldridge said, there was a jerk in the elevator, and he said, ghost. Okay, we're not staying here. Ghosts are a no-no. They're not cool. They're not Casper. We don't have that same idea. The idea of a ghost is like you have bad spiritual hygiene. Something's wrong, you should get that fixed. And don't whistle after dark. That bugged people. I used to whistle all the time. Of course, it may just be they didn't like my whistling, but that's actually European superstition as well, yes.
What kind of superstition? Like, it seems rather odd that it would just be don't whistle after dark.
You don't know who you're calling. They hear you.
Raising the dead or sort of?
It calls the ghosts that are in the neighborhood. And that's another reason that that little chimney thing that I showed you where they burn ghost money. Well, when you burn ghost money, it crosses to the other side. It's like in a Catholic school. When they throw the censer, that incense takes something to the other side. When you burn ghost money, poor ghosts come running. And sometimes they're poor because they have no family, because they were shunned. They can be bad ghosts. And whistling after dark, you might call ghosts. And I mentioned I used to live, when I lived in or around the cemetery, my address was actually 244. The number 4 in not just Chinese, but also in Korean. I don't know, any Japanese students here? I know quite, does 4 sound like death? It's in Japanese, it's in Chinese, it's in Korean. The number 4 sounds like death, even though it may sound slightly different in each culture. The 4 is death. So there's no 4 in a hospital. And most hotels don't have a 4th floor. And if your apartment is 244, you'll get it cheap. I told you it was really cheap. But my friends didn't want to come visit me. It was too far. None of them had to go through a cemetery, but I stayed in 244. It was bad mojo. Now, one of the first books I read when I was trying to figure out Taiwan and China and when I was living over there was a book by Richard Hartzell, called Harmony and Conflict, and I hated it. He's right sometimes he tells a story about a gentleman who didn't bother learning Chinese language. He just learned to give face to the people around him and get other people to do translating for him. He's like, really, you don't need to learn Chinese? And yeah, one of the reasons I hate him is because he's kind of right. He has a point. But I think it's good to learn Chinese language. You understand things better. Things make a little bit more sense. And there's this idea about the law. I think the reason I put this slide in here, and this will be available if you want to read it later. There's a link I'll share with everyone. And I think there's a link on that handout that'll take you to a collection of this stuff. But this talks a little bit about the law, and the law is thought of a little bit differently. Policemen don't have quite the respect there they do here. And enforcement is completely arbitrary. And one of the things he mentioned is one day they will enforce a law on, well, for example, right turns he mentions. It's illegal to make a right turn on a red light, which makes no sense to me. Most of the time, there's no laws enforced. You'll see police cars with lights flashing. They do that. I asked someone why, because nobody pays any attention. They don't move. Traffic's too crazy anyway. I said, why do police cars have flashing lights then? They said, so you can see the police and behave better. And that saves face for the policeman. And I like that. That makes sense to me. All right? But one day I got arrested for making a right turn on a red light without stopping, which I thought was silly. It really paid for me not to speak Chinese at that moment. To be honest, I did understand when he said Hong Dun, meaning red light, and Yo Bien, right turn, Yo Tuan, I think, actually. How do you say right turn? Yo, that yo. I understood that. And then I started to follow, and then I suddenly said, oh, wait, no, I don't speak Chinese. And he just got kind of frustrated. Get out of here. Sometimes it's better not to speak Chinese. I also have, though the traffic cameras, they have those. They've had those for a long time in Asia. It's face-saving way to enforce the law. I've got 2 tickets for something or other, driving my car. In South Korea, I find it very interesting. You'll get a letter in the mail. I got one in Taiwan, and it was a picture of me, and you could see my arm hang out the window. They have begun in some parts of Asia, Southeast Asia, to blur out the passenger seat. Anyone want to guess why?
They're talking about one person in particular?
Yeah. because I think it was Korea it first started happening. When letters come from the government to your house, anybody might open them. And spouses were opening their mail and seeing someone with their spouse in a car. And it saves face to blur out that picture so we don't know if anyone else was in the car. But I wanted to find a picture of me driving my car, but sent to me by the government, but I couldn't find it. Yeah. And this is just don't. Since I'm on the theme of things not to do in Asia, that is what you see when you first get off the airplane in Taiwan. Yes, drug trafficking is punishable by death. And I'm not sure how you're not in America anymore. People used to find out I was in Kansas say, you're not in Kansas anymore. No, it's different. In most of Asia, if you end up in prison, you have to pay for your own food and medical and soap and what have you. And the death penalty, I don't think they harvest organs anymore in China. I think they're phasing that out. But the death, it's very serious. Prisons are not places I would want to be. Though if you do go to Thailand, it's nice to go visit the prison, to visit Americans and mostly Europeans who have gotten stuck in Asia for doing things they shouldn't have done. Now I mentioned expats and what I've learned because I was there for 5 or 6 years and I hung out in pubs for a while and I got to know people. It's a small community. When there's only like 30 or 40 Westerners in a town of 1 million, you stick out. Yeah, just don't. Because people would, I already mentioned traffic cameras, and leaving Thailand, it's just as important to not be trafficking anything there. They don't care so much about bringing it in there. I would say don't trust anyone when it comes to local flora or fauna, but watch the behavior of locals. Now this really terrible picture of a smashed snake is, the reason it's in here is that was right in front of my house. And that is a banded crate, which Western literature, you start Googling it, Wikipedia says something about it's not really that dangerous. Kipling has a story about it. Rikki Tikki Tavi, that deadly snake that was so deadly early in the story, that was a crate. All right, according to Kipling, it was deadly. And Kipling lived in Asia for quite a while. Roald Dahl, who wrote Matilda, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, those books, he's got some really cool, darker short stories. He has a story about a crate. I forgot. Sherlock Holmes. Who was that written by? Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. There's the speckled band. That's a crate. In Western, there's a huge history in Western literature of banded crates being particularly scary and dangerous. And it's true that a bite from one of these snakes can kill a bull, a full-size water buffalo. So when people say it's not that, because they're quiet though, and they like to avoid confrontation, and they'll generally move away from you. I know that because there was a bamboo grove behind my house, and I wanted to cut bamboo for my clothesline. And so my landlord said it was okay, so I went back there, and I didn't want to take green bamboo because, I wanted to, I'll just take a dead one because I didn't want to disrupt the ecology too much. Don't do that. Don't cut dead bamboo because there was one of those living in it, and it kind of freaked me out. There is also, you will read stories sometimes about the bamboo viper. And there's a story, there's anybody like the Venture Brothers? Yeah, there's a link on the next slide to one of my favorite, to a blog or post I wrote about one of my favorite episodes of the Venture Brothers, where he talks about the Vietnamese two-step viper. The idea of a two-step viper, the two-step, do you know where that comes from? The idea, what that means, two steps. Yep. Unless you are 2 steps from anti-venom, you're dead. And crates aren't very aggressive, but yeah, don't step on one. There are a lot of cobras in islands, especially that were controlled by the Japanese, especially in the tropics in Southeast Asia. They have quite, especially Taiwan, I know for a fact. At least this is what my students told me. During the Japanese War, there were experiments done on developing biological weapons. And they took and this is what my students told me. I don't have a lot of resources to back it up. But the story is that they used the venom from poisonous snakes to develop chemicals and weapons. And then when Japan fell, when the bombs dropped, they just basically threw open the cages and walked off. And in Taiwan, I was close up, the crate right there I got a picture of. I don't have a living picture of one. Cobra, I was on campus where I was teaching, and I remember getting out staring at it. I have a good eye for wildlife, for finding it. And I was with this friend of mine who was teaching at the same college, and we were just kind of it was kind of sunning itself. It was a little sluggish in the morning. And one of the guys that taught at my school had marched with Chiang Kai-shek. He was old, but he was not a man to trifle with. He was probably in his 70s at the time. And he walked up and, hey, it makes good wine. Evidently, if you take Cobra and put it in wine, it's supposed to make it good somehow. Never tried it. I'll take their word for it. Never tried it. He walked right up and grabbed that thing by the tail. Now, he says he knew it was a cobra, but you can't really tell until the head pops up and the hood opens up. And that is coincidentally when the snake got away. But he said he knew it was a cobra. Oh, and the reason I said don't trust anyone on local flora or fauna, watch how people behave. I never saw people, when I was living, especially in the tropics, swatting bugs. They would brush them off. And I thought maybe that was a Buddhist thing, and it might be, that they would just brush off insects rather than swatting them on their skin. What my doctor called it was an insa-chong, and it comes from that same story where I was cutting bamboo. I scared up a swarm of something, like gnats, like flying bugs, and they landed on me, and I was like, smack, 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 smack. There is no poison ivy in Taiwan or much of Southeast Asia yet. However, the juice from the insa-chong, that little flying worm, chong is like worm, the blood from it or juice reacted with my skin like poison ivy. I just bubbled up all over. It was awful. So yeah, brush off if you see other people brushing off insects, maybe that's what you should do. That and God, I'm so embarrassed about this, but all right. Why you shouldn't slap a coworker? I remember sitting in faculty meetings are not pleasant, to be completely honest. They get boring, and especially when they're in Chinese, and your Chinese is not so good, or at least not good enough to follow all of it, you kind of tone out. And I remember in front of me there was this woman had a bug on her, and of some sort. This is before I had my experience with the insa-chong. And the woman next to her is like doing this, and like, you know, I'm like, after about 15 minutes, I just got frustrated and smack. No, it wasn't appreciated. Did not go over well. No, that was wrong. I'm embarrassed about that. I shouldn't have done it. That is a bamboo viper. And in that episode of Venture Brothers, the Vietnamese two-step, it's basically the bamboo viper is what they talk about. That episode is deep. The things they talk about Thailand, I won't go into detail. If you want to read my blog, I go into extreme detail. I feel kind of bad I had to kill that. I wouldn't have. This was the courtyard in front of my house, and evidently, according to evil Ama, and there's another story I think I talk about in the blog. Ama is a term for grandma in Asia. She came and knocked on my door and she had her toddler on her back, and she said I had to kill it. And of course I asked why, and it has poison. I understood all that. Okay. Then I was starting to freak out a little bit because I thought, oh, that's a bamboo viper then, huh? Because it's the same color, looks just like a stalk of bamboo, and it's supposed to be a two-step viper. But she has the toddlers running around, and she says, I have to kill it. It would be a terrible loss of face if I had not taken care of this situation. Got the adrenaline up, and the only thing I could find was it's called a mattock. You know what a mattock is? It's like a sledgehammer, but it's got like a spade at one end and a big spike on the other. It's like you see pictures, they're like working in the coal mine, swinging a big It was huge. It was heavy. It never would have worked. She just laughed at me and went and got me a broom handle, which is evidently also from The Simpsons, snake whacking day. Broom handles. That's what they use. She gave me a broom handle. And my adrenaline was up so much that after I whacked that snake, I pulled a muscle in my back and my arm. I gotta admit, it was like, because I'd read about bamboo vipers, two-steppers, and I feel bad about that. I really don't, I like snakes in general, but Evil Ama was dangerous. I didn't want to get on the wrong side. Don't abuse the wall tigers. This guy is a gecko, but the word for a gecko in Chinese is bihu. Bihu, bi, chuang bi to bi, it's a wall, and lao hu is tiger. Bihu is wall tiger, because they are little tigers. They eat mosquitoes and other bugs too. And I liked having them in my bathroom because I didn't have any problem with insects in my bathroom. It was awesome. And I just thought they were cute. I liked them. Now, in Taiwan, they're really small. And they like bathrooms, probably because there's bugs there. Or it's cold and damp. In Thailand, though, I remember one time going into a little outside bathroom in Koh Phangan, I think, one of the islands. And I didn't quite see it because they blend in so well with things. It must have been about 18 inches long, and it must have weighed, it was kind of fat too, but not fat, fluffy. They're lizards. They're dense. And I scared it, evidently, almost as much as it scared me, because it took off. It was like the mass of a cat, and it's like took off through a window and shook the whole building. And I really had to go. It was really not a good time to scare me. But, I held everything together. But I love geckos. I show this picture just because people never believe me when I say that it's so humid in the rainy season that the walls will run with water. It's just humidity from the air. The slight change in temperature, it condenses on the wall, and just everything is soaking wet. And I came back to Kansas after living in Taiwan, and people said, "Oh, it's so humid here." No, it's not. I took a shirt out of a closet one time, and I had not worn the shirt once before, but just once. It was lightly worn. I didn't wash it. Put it in the closet for a few, weeks. Took it out, and evidently I'd eaten something and touched my shirt with my hands that were not clean. And I had fungus growing in the shape of my fingerprints. Right here on my shirt. I had to wash it then, but freaky humid. If I ever show this video, if you're planning to go to China to study, this is a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I'd say I don't really mean you shouldn't leave the campus ever, but it's probably good advice to tell you not to, because college campuses are subsidized by the government in Asia, generally. They're walled in with fences, spiked walls and stuff to protect you. It's safe. Now, as a foreigner, you're pretty, throughout Asia, it's a good place to be, actually. They leave you alone. A friend of mine ticked off, he passed a motorcycle gang. They ride scooters sometimes, but they took that as a challenge. Evidently, you don't pass a motorcycle gang, young thugs. They have thugs over there. And he thought he was in a lot of trouble. He took off his helmet, and they saw he was blonde and blue-eyed, and they just suddenly everything changed. Oh, hello. Everybody knows hello. Hello. How are you? And that's all he knew. But if he were Chinese or Asian looking, he would have been beaten up, I'm sure. Another reason I said don't stay on campus, don't leave. Some places aren't what they seem. For example, barbershops. And I'm not going to go look at images on Google for right now, but you can when you get this. Or Google barbershops China, barbershops Taiwan. You're going to see a lot of pictures of very scantily clad women. And you're going to wonder why. Nobody told me. If you go into a barbershop that has carpet on the floor, by the way, how many barbershops have carpet on the floor? If it has smoked windows, and if it has a barber pole on it, that striped, pole with, the barber pole, right? Yeah, well, they offer special services, and if it's carpeting on the floor, it's exclusively special services. I didn't know that. I do remember there was one right across the street from my the first place I lived downtown. You know, a couple months, just everything's so clean. It was right in front of my face, and I didn't know it. I needed a haircut. Walked in, and it was really confusing. He just kept saying this word in Chinese I didn't understand. Lo mantica. Lo mantica. Lo mantica. Can you figure it out? Yeah, he was speaking English. I didn't know that. Romantic, and I was like, what? And then he did this hand gesture I'm not going to recreate, but it was pretty graphic and involved, oh, huh? I was really confused. Then on the airplane, when I went to Hong Kong to get my visa changed, I sat next to somebody, an old China hand who had been there for a long time. And he's like, I mentioned that, and he goes, oh, God, you didn't know barbershops? You don't know what they are? It's like, no. They're basically brothels. Not all of them. There are places that actually cut hair. There are. They don't have carpeting on the floor. But all this time I thought they were all...
If you're on the outside, is there a barber pole where you cut your hair?
I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure. I want to say no. I don't think there is, but I could be wrong. But you probably... No? I don't know. But I asked my friends who were Chinese when after that why they didn't tell me, and they said, "Why do you need to know?" Everybody. So well, why wouldn't you tell me? Spas. Oh gosh, yeah. I did one time because I was spending a night living in the dorm my first 6 months. The dorm closed at like 11 o'clock, and they locked the doors, and you can't get in. You can call the person who owns it, the mom or pop who owns it, but it's really awkward. Basically, if you're not in by curfew, it's better to find someplace else. And a friend of mine said I could crash at his house because I didn't feel like going home at 10:30. It's like, oh, no, stay out. I'll take care of you. And then it's like, no, I don't want to go home. So he took me to a spa that was where you could spend the night. And it was cool. It had like 3 hot tubs of different temperatures. It was a spa. It was nice. And then I fell asleep, and all these big chairs everywhere where all these men were sleeping. You all had your own chair. Just kind of chill out, and then the police showed up. And that was an awkward story to tell my future wife, who was over there at that time, because she's part of the culture, and she said she was really mad at me, and I had no idea why. And she said, and it was because she wouldn't come out and say it. We have this indirect communication, which we try to avoid as much as we can. But that spas don't get visited by the police unless there's something going on. And there was a place at one point where they asked me if I wanted a massage, but I had this thing about I don't like strangers touching me. I just don't get it. It's just me. But I had no idea. But then I found out I should not tell people that story into Asia because it's like, yeah, you didn't know. Well, no. And I didn't have my ID. You're supposed to carry your ID everywhere in most Asian countries. Yeah, but sometimes being a foreigner, not speaking the language or pretending not to speak it can be an advantage. Don't tip in Asia. I did once in Thailand. Now, if it's a newer city, if it's a more urban, Shanghai, I'm guessing probably, but the bigger cities in Taiwan, if you're in a pub or someplace that serves a lot of foreigners, they will understand tipping. But I did get in a little trouble in Thailand once because I tipped the young lady bringing my food, and later the manager came and asked me what the heck I was doing and what I was trying to imply. My waitress was offended. And then I explained I was tipping. Oh, okay, he's tipping. And I explained it to her in Thai. And she was evidently fairly new and from the hills and assumed that I was making something unsavory. I was just trying to get quicker service, really. But throughout Asia, people don't tip. Don't compare women to geishas. I had a friend who kept talking to a Japanese woman saying, oh, is that like a geisha? You look like a geisha. She wouldn't. Geishas have something to... I don't understand geishas completely, but it's not as... It implies... I think there's sex involved. I'm not sure. No?
Not with a true geisha.
Really?
In Japan, there are women who are prostitutes who try to look like geisha, but geisha means person of art, and they are performing artists.
Okay.
Yeah. When they are strictly geisha, they are performing artists. But there are a lot of women who try to look like geisha,
All right. I know that it's beetle nut girls in Taiwan are really beautiful, but don't compare a woman to a beetle nut girl. They always put them on next to the road, up high, in a glassed-in box, and you stop. And beetle nut is like chewing tobacco, only worse. You spit copious amounts of blood red juice. It's a bit of a narcotic, but like nicotine's a bit of a drug too. It's just stronger than nicotine. Piano girls, I know piano girls in Taiwan, they're not all, in these situations, now beetle nut girls, all they do is sell beetle nut, but piano girls are often, they go to your house and play the piano for you. And I guess other things are negotiable. You don't hand money to someone without an envelope. Just don't do it. Put it in an envelope, it's just better, use both hands. But handing someone cash just looks unsavory. Don't pick up a red envelope off the ground if you don't know where it came from. I mean, if it's your money and you dropped it, you can pick it up. But if you see a red envelope on the ground walking around, I do know people who have married ghosts. Because accepting that red envelope, that money was put there by the family of someone who died. Usually a woman. And they don't want her to be single in the afterlife. So whoever picked that up, boom, you're married to a ghost. I don't know, that might just be Taiwan. Only Taiwan. But I do know people that you can still marry other people if you're married to a ghost, but it sometimes upsets the ghost and you have bad luck following you. Don't chew beetle nut because it will cause cancer. And it stains everything, and it is really socially not popular with people. But then neither is chewing tobacco, and that's kind of like Western Kansas. The 3 T's, generally it's going to be awkward to bring up Tiananmen. What are the other 2? Taiwan and Tibet. So it's just don't talk about this. And I already screwed that up. And most importantly, don't do as the Romans do. Everybody's got this idea that when in Rome, do as the Romans do. But it's not Rome. And you don't understand it. I mean, people have lived there decades and not understood Asia. Australian Rod, guy from Washington. I remember the guy. He came to, he saw the backwards swastika, which is not really, I don't know the real name of it. It's actually a Buddhist symbol, And I told him, he was a vegetarian. I said, oh yeah. He said, there's not many places to get vegetarian food in Asia. And I said, wait, no. Look for restaurants that display that symbol, the backwards, thing. It's vegetarian, hardcore vegetarian. It's good food. But he just had this idea that, well, he did he thought he was doing what the Romans do, had a girlfriend, a local girlfriend. Oh no, it's cool. And then they moved in together. And I said, really? That's kind of. I had a friend who had 4 boyfriends in her life, and they made fun of her for being loose because she had 4 boyfriends. I thought, could I be wrong? Eventually, Rod broke up with that girl, and she had to leave. She had to move away from her hometown to another part of Taiwan where nobody knew her because she lost face. She couldn't face her family after that. And I always felt bad because I knew his girlfriend, and she was really nice. And then there's Australian John who taught children. And you hear about people, corporal punishment in schools being a lot more common over there. And he thought that, you could, punish students, maybe because they were so crazy, especially the younger ones. American kindergartens, kids sit quietly and they don't move, they don't talk. In Taiwanese, and I've heard it's the same in China, I don't know. Kindergartens, children are just boisterous. They're just everywhere. It didn't turn out well for him. I can't remember what he did, but yeah, it's a good idea to not touch children. Even though it seems like all the other teachers are doing it, you don't understand the culture. You're not part of the culture. Don't assume you understand it. I think that do as the Romans do gets people in a lot of trouble in Asia because they don't understand it. Do learn to sing a song because you might have to sing for your supper. You might get a wonderful dinner. It's really expensive, and you think, wow, this is awesome. And then at the end, they'll say, you have to sing. And they'll pull out a karaoke machine. KTVs in Taiwan, I think in China, they're just called karaoke or karaoke or something. They're not just accepted. They're part of expected culture. after finals, students will go to a karaoke and they'll sing together. There are risks. And if you go to images on Google and you look up KTV, and you're going to get, this is the first one that you get. Notice there's a barber pole on it. And your question earlier about, well, I think that barbershop pole indicates that special services are available. Most are. And even though there's varying degrees of how dangerous or how, you can have families in there, completely wholesome, and then the next door you can pay and have someone come sing with you. And then whatever goes on there, I don't know. But I'd say avoid that. Now, proper dress for temples, and this is the same in Thailand, and if you're going to a temple, it's better not to wear shorts if you're a guy, or it's better to dress a little bit more respectfully. And I mentioned how to cross your feet so you don't point your soles of your feet at anybody. But this one, if I had better resolution, this is my first digital camera I bought in like '96. If I could blow that up, like the middle part in here, women, if you're having your time of the month, you're not welcome. And I couldn't believe they wrote that in English and everything. You can't visit the temple if you're having your, whatever, I'm having trouble saying it. Menstruating, that's the word they used, I believe. You're not welcome. I just thought that was pretty outrageous that they would put that on the sign. Don't count on similar hygiene products. I had trouble finding razors, but electric razors, yes, no problem. Well, this is from Son of the Circus by John Irving. It mentions one of the characters in there. She's happy when she gets married because she can finally wear tampons, because otherwise she wouldn't be a virgin anymore when she got married. You don't find that particular hygiene product. Well, right. My best friend in Taiwan that was an American, was from Iowa. She was about my age. She was from the Midwest. We taught at the same school. We liked the same music. We hung out together. And she had a female roommate, and according to them, you can't find tampons anywhere in Taiwan. And I will take them for their word. I might be wrong. Maybe you know the culture better, but I always thought in Armageddon, there's the Rockhound talks about going into Taipei to buy tampons for Liv Tyler. I thought that was wrong. That doesn't make sense. Deodorant can be hard to find. But once you find out where to get it, you can generally find it most places. Some places, but it can be hard to find. I'm getting close to the end. I will mention, don't believe everything you read about Asia. This was probably the first book on China I started reading, by Edgar Rice Snow. Snow's good. He was one of the authorities on China, but he wasn't always right. And this picture right here is from Edgar Rice Snow. It says at the bottom, in Sichuan, Mao Zedong is quoted in Snow's book, in this book. And Mao Zedong said to Snow, in Sichuan, an 18-year-old woman go trouserless because they're too poor to buy them. If Hitler wants to prohibit nudism in China, he'll have to furnish us with trousers. I have trouble accepting at face value that was the only issue with why she has no pants on. It was a war, and there are casualties of war. I don't think it was just that she was poor. Edgar Rice Snow was wrong on a few things. In China Wakes, a wonderful book on that list I handed out by Christophe and Udon. The title comes from a line from Napoleon when he said, China is a sleeping giant. When it wakes, the earth will tremble. In China Wakes, he talked about how Edgar Rice Snow went to China in 57 or 60. During the Great Leap Forward, there was a famine. 30 million people died. And every town Edgar Rice Snow stopped in, he went with Mao on a train throughout China. Everywhere they stopped, there was rice in the streets piled up from the harvest. Snow came back and said there's no famine in China. All that story about people starving is a lie. Turns out that rice was the same rice at every town. They loaded it on the same train. He just didn't realize that. Every stop, they unloaded the rice and then loaded it back up and took it to the next town. Don't believe he's a great authority, but don't trust everything you read. And whenever I pick up books at garage sales and half-price bookstores, if they start out with, when I was in China, Westerners were so rare the locals would stare at me. It's just culture. People are going to stare at you. I don't think that means that you were the first one that ever went there. Yeah, I don't know about quoting Confucius to an Asian woman can be like quoting Corinthians 14:34. Anybody know Corinthians 14:34? Let the women be silent in church, indeed, for they are not allowed to speak. If they want to know anything, let them inquire of their husbands at home. I don't think that's going to go over well anywhere. Confucius has a hierarchy, and men are above women. And when I would try, I had my book on Confucius when I went to Taiwan, and I would try to make conversation and engage people on discussions, and it didn't always go over well. And I really want to explore this idea that Confucius is to China as Dewey is to the United States, because actually I believe China called Dewey, some Chinese people called Dewey the Confucius, the new Confucius, or the Confucius of America. I want to learn more about that. Just some pictures. I'm done now pretty much. This is just a typical scene. That's only 3 people on a motor scooter. That's not, I've seen 5. You can do it. If someone's, and this is an aqueduct that was outside of my house when I lived in the mountains, where I had all the snakes. Don't go swimming in aqueducts. I did. It was a lot of fun. But A, it's dangerous, and you don't know where it goes. If I'd have got a cramp or something, it would have been all over. Nobody knew. And B, someone may be drinking that water later on. It's probably not right to swim in it. And right now, there's a thing going on where they talk about, this is road food, and I got to trust it. But I don't know. If you trust the people, if you know they're using good oil, I'd say talk to a local you trust. You know, listen to your friends. And I remember people trying to explain when I came back, I was really excited about this religious thing I went to, big Da Bai Bai. It was a big prayer, big religious thing. And they competed to grow the largest pigs. They were geldings. Is that right? They were neutered anyway. And they were fattened up to where the pig was so fat it couldn't even walk. They would massage them, they air conditioned their little hut, force fed them, got enormous. And then they would sacrifice them essentially. They'd butcher them and spread out their skins over these giant trucks and then donate the fat to poor families or whatever. But it wasn't about meat. It wasn't about meat production. It was more about a cultural thing. And culture is just hard to explain. That took a lot long. I guess it did take a full 50 minutes. I will take questions, though. We're out of time. But any questions real quick? Yes. I'm really interested in that. I never tried it, and I think I regret that. A friend of mine did. He loved it. I had a teacher at KU who got into it a little bit, and then he was trying to do a demonstration, so he poked a few things in his arm and his hand for pictures, and they ended up temporarily paralyzing himself. Well, there's a belief that the body is regulated by qi, which flows through the body, and it controls your health. And by acupuncture directs and changes the direction and flow of qi somehow, I think. And qi is interesting. I don't really fully understand it. But I don't know very much about acupuncture. I kind of wish I'd have tried it.
We had a session on acupuncture a semester ago. We might have another one sometime.
I'd be interested in that. Yeah.
Why did you pick East Asia as your region of interest? Out of all other places in the world, the culture is so drastically different, the Western culture. Why would you do that?
That's why I did it. I wanted something different. Actually, when I was young, I remember asking my mom, you know, if you won one of those Price is Right trips anywhere in the world, where would you go? And she said China, because it was as far as it was so alien. And to be honest, when I was 27, 28, when I took off, I think I took like a knitting needle and shoved it through a globe. And as far as you can get from Kansas without leaving the planet is Taiwan, pretty much. It's almost directly, completely the other side.
What is the hardest thing about having an intercultural marriage? My husband's from Bali, actually.
Oh, interesting. I love Bali. People are so nice. It's like, okay, it's kind of like culture shock. Culture shock is worse, I think, when you come back to America than when you go the first place and spend 10 or 15 years. And you come back, you think you understand what's going on, but you don't. But you don't realize you don't understand it. That's what the real danger is, I think. I think it's sometimes when I think I know what's going on within the culture, and it's just, I don't. Like, I had to learn things that they make perfect sense to me, but I can't explain them. All right, I mentioned earlier about the cemeteries and the ghosts. When I was in Hawaii, there was a young man who works for them. I can't remember his name. Joe. And we stopped a bus for a minute, and he said, "Oh, there's the Chinese cemetery. You should get out and take pictures." And I said, "Oh, do you have any pictures of yourself with that cemetery?" Because he's also married to a Chinese woman. He just laughed. Of course not. Really? So your wife is like mine. My wife would not think that pictures of a cemetery were cool. That she would not think that they were high culture. That would just be creepy and inviting ghosts. And I mean, if you believe in what is a ghost, it's like defining. We get hung up on words, and the thing is, ghost may seem silly to us in our culture, but if you really understood the translation, it's not so silly. It has to do with their belief system, and you just have to be careful. Things sometimes that you think are trivial turn out not to be, and you never know until it's too late. Yeah. I lived in Taiwan from 95 to 2000. I've been back, and then while I was there, I could afford to travel throughout Southeast Asia, so I spent most of my vacations in Thailand because it was cheaper to go there than to stay in Taiwan. And it was more fun, too. I went to Bali one time for a month, Chinese New Year. I went to China one time, yeah.
Were you easy? What is easy? Do people on the street, do they speak English? Were you able to stop the taxi or a rickshaw or whatever? Did anybody understand you, or it was like?
It depends on the country. Young people in Taiwan, they know a little English, and and the better education they have, the more anxious they are to try. Doctors usually speak pretty good English.
No, I mean like on the street when you go to the restaurant, to the street vendor, try to.
Not generally, no.
Or stop.
Not in Taiwan. However, you got to watch yourself. I know stories about people getting in the habit of just thinking out loud and saying, "Oh, wow, she's pretty. Oh, whoops. Yeah, she understands English." Now, the Philippines, people speak English real well throughout the Philippines. Yes. Mm-hmm. And Thailand has a lot more tourism. They speak English pretty well. They do. I'm not. It depends where you go. Not so much in China. I mean, young people, well-educated people, but people are funny. I remember going in. This has happened several times. Going up to someone lost in a university setting. "Excuse me, do you speak English?" A little. And then you find out this guy who says he speaks a little English has a PhD from Oxford in English literature. You know, the guy speaks English better than I do, but he'll only admit to speaking a little English. So, airports, you're fine. Taxis are dangerous, iffy. If you have a name card, it doesn't matter. Just go here. But young people are generally have a little bit, but not so much the Chinas, but it depends on tourism mostly.
No, I was in India, I was in New Delhi, and nobody
Really?
on the street, nobody.
I have not been.
Taxi, whatever, local vendor, street, you just put, your finger, this way,
Yeah.
one day people, you cannot explain that, don't put all that pepper, no.
Well,
Nobody speaks English, and I was surprised, I thought in India, everybody.
I did too. Now, I would like to go to India. That's one place I haven't been yet. And that is where most of my friends said, I'd ask them, well, where would you want to go back to? And they would say India. Okay. I haven't been there yet, but I thought that was one of their national languages, English. I did not know that. Any other questions? Yeah.
Did you notice, talk to youth, did you notice any contrast between the youth and like in America, you see the young generation and their lifestyle contrasts greatly to some extent to like the people,
It has been a while. And I hesitate because I thought I'd noticed a lot of differences and then came home and found out I was wrong. For example, I thought Britney Spears would not be popular in America because I heard her music. And I thought, there's no way. They played it all the time in Asia. I thought, why? I couldn't get it. No, I'm not going to see that. And I come home and she's everywhere. But then I saw pictures of her and realized why. I thought that some of the things people did, youth culture changes so fast. It's hard for me to answer that. I think that people are a bit more conservative. They're still more careful. Socially, when it comes to like dating and stuff, they don't tend to date until they're in college. And there is a difference in High school, junior high are incredibly competitive. But college, once you get in, you're probably more than likely to make it through, and people tend to relax a little bit. Where here, it seems to be like you coast through high school, and then you get to college and suddenly have to work for the first time. At least that's the way it was for me. So there's a little difference there. They're under so much pressure. They don't date so much, but teen suicide is a problem there as well, but it's pressure from school there. It's not social pressure as much. I think bullying is actually probably, it seemed alien to me when I would hear about it, but it's a problem here too. I think that's a really good question. I'm not really qualified to answer. Yeah.
What sort of punishments would they put on their kid? It's like,
Oh. For corporal punishment, and not every family does it. And this idea that corporal punishment, I did have a parent once come to me and say that if my child misbehaves, please beat them. I want him to learn, but never did. Don't do it. Don't fall in that trap. I loved as a teacher, my goal was to get people to speak English, and the less I speak, the better, less work. I would ask people about corporal punishment and get lots of stories. Everyone has a story. Parents evidently favor a bamboo stick to the calf down here. Like here we always spank butts, but no, it's like, that doesn't make sense to them. They slap the calf down here. That seems to be real popular. I did hear a story about a teacher cutting a girl's hair for corporal punishment in a classroom, but that girl's parents came in and cut the teacher's hair later. So no, teachers are more respected, but you can't get away with that either, I don't think. Yeah. One last question? Yeah?
What do you miss the most?
Food. Food was great, and it's different. It's not like Chinese food here. The food, people are really nice. Southeast Asia is like the only place you can go, and being an American is awesome. You know, they don't care. Though, the more you mix with Europeans, the better it's. They don't put a flag on your backpack. Put a Canadian flag. See, I had flags of every place I'd visited on my backpack, so people didn't see an they assumed I was Canadian. I didn't know that. Some people do that on purpose. I miss that. I don't miss the pollution. It is bad, but it's getting better. They're starting to work on it. People were so nice. I think the hospitality and food is huge in the culture and part of the hospitality in that. All right. Well, thank you very much.